My name is Clara Jensen, and for 4 years my family treated me like I had stepped off the map. No holiday calls, no birthday texts, no sudden just checking in messages after rainstorms or long weekends. Nothing. I had gone from daughter to silence in one clean motion, all because I would not do what my father wanted back then. He had a vision for my life, a corporate path he deemed suitable, and when I chose to pursue my passion for coffee and community instead, he simply cut me off. It was a cold, sharp blade, but it severed me from a constant pressure I hadn't realized was crushing me. So I stopped waiting for the kind of warmth that only ever arrived with conditions and built something of my own instead. My world was Riverbend Roasters, my coffee shop on a narrow corner off Alder Street in Richmond, Virginia. It was all warm, exposed brick at the front and soft, inviting light by 6:30 every morning. I had poured every ounce of my savings, every drop of my determination, into that place. I bought one used grinder at a time, scrubbing away years of neglect until it hummed with new life. I painted the walls myself, choosing a calming sage green that felt like fresh air, my hands aching at the end of each day but my spirit soaring. I learned how to fix a stubborn sink with nothing but YouTube tutorials and a coffee-stained patience that became my new superpower. I rewrote the chalkboard menu so often my regulars started teasing me about my handwriting, each letter a testament to the fact that this was truly mine. By spring, people knew the place. The laptop crowd huddled by the window, tapping away at their keyboards, fueled by my lattes. The retired couple, Mr. and Mrs. Evans, always came at 8:30 sharp, sharing a blueberry scone and a pot of chamomile tea. Grant, a kind history professor, arrived every day for his black drip and another blueberry scone. Soft music always played, just loud enough to be pleasant, never intrusive. The counters were always clean, smelling of fresh coffee and pastries. This was my life, small and steady and fully, gloriously mine. It was more than a business. It was proof that I could thrive without their approval, without their money, without their very presence. It was my quiet rebellion. That Tuesday started the same way. The milk steamer hissed, a comforting sound of creation. Pastries, baked fresh that morning, were lined up in the display case, gleaming under the soft lights. A low Richmond drizzle was drying off in the front windows, leaving streaks that caught the morning sun. I was pulling shots just before 8, the rich aroma filling the air, when the bell above the glass door rang and the whole room seemed to shift around the sound, the comfortable hum instantly replaced by a prickling silence. My father came in first. He was wearing his charcoal coat, his polished shoes clicked loudly on my polished concrete floor, and his shoulders were still broad enough to take up too much space before he even said a word. My mother followed beside him, her bright, social smile plastered on her face, the one she wears when she wants strangers to assume everything is perfectly lovely and she is just visiting her dear, successful daughter. Behind them came my younger sister, Leia, holding her phone at chest height, camera lens tilted just enough to catch the entire room and, most importantly, my face in her frame. They didn't pause at the line where my loyal customers were waiting. They didn't wait for a greeting from me or anyone else. They moved straight to the counter like they had every right to stand there, as if they owned the place. "What a cute little place, Clara," my father said, his voice carrying, loud enough for half the room to hear. It wasn't a compliment, it was a pronouncement, a thinly veiled judgment that this was merely a little place. My mother smiled toward a woman waiting patiently on a latte, her eyes sweeping the room, performing for the captive audience. She always did have good taste, didn't she? Good taste. 4 years of utter silence, 4 years where I ceased to exist, and now I was suddenly, she again, useful enough to claim in public, just when it suited them. I set the milk pitcher down very slowly, the warm metal still in my hand, then wiped my hands on a towel, taking a deep breath, steeling myself. I stepped forward, putting on my most neutral customer service smile. "Can I help you?" My father's public smile vanished as quickly as it had arrived, replaced by a stern, businesslike expression. He opened a leather portfolio, the expensive kind, and placed a stapled packet on my counter with one flat motion, not theatrical, not rushed, just practiced, a gesture he had perfected in countless boardrooms. "Sign this, Clara," he commanded. I looked down. My business name, Riverbend Roasters LLC, sat at the top in bold, demanding attention. Below it, clean, typed lines detailed partnership participation, family share, operating rights. 15%. My name already printed in place, like all that was left was my pen, like it was a done deal. I looked back up at him, my expression unwavering. Why would I sign over part of my business? My mother gave a tiny laugh, soft enough to sound friendly if you didn't know her, if you hadn't experienced the ice beneath her charming facade. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, dear. Leia adjusted her phone angle, a silent, predatory gleam in her eyes, eager for the drama. My father leaned on the counter, not enough for anyone across the room to call it a scene, just enough to bring his voice lower, more menacing, meant only for me. You want to keep playing independent, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. Fine, but there's a cost to that, Clara. 15% keeps things smooth. It's a family investment. I could feel the eyes of my customers on me, the quiet hum of conversation dying down completely. And if I say no? I asked, my voice calm, belying the storm inside me. He didn't blink. His gaze was unwavering, cold. Then I make one call. I held his gaze, refusing to flinch. To who? I challenged. Your landlord. The words landed, but not the way he hoped. They felt more like cold water, chilling but not causing panic. He kept going, because men like my father always mistake momentum for certainty, always believe their threats are absolute. I tell him this setup needs a closer look. I tell him the space is being used in ways he may not appreciate. I let him decide whether this little project of yours stays easy. My mother folded her hands lightly over her expensive handbag, a picture of polite concern. You're still renting, Clara. Stability matters. Across the room, Grant had gone perfectly still over his laptop, his usual kind face etched with concern. A woman by the pastry case pretended to study the muffins, her posture rigid, listening to every single word anyway. The room had that very American kind of quiet you only hear in a small business when strangers realize something deeply personal has just become publicly, uncomfortably tense. I slid the packet back toward him with the edge of a napkin, a simple, decisive motion. No, I said, the word ringing with more conviction than I realized I possessed. My father's jaw tightened, a vein throbbing slightly in his temple. Then I call him, he stated, pulling out his phone. Okay, I said, the word stopped him cold. Okay, he repeated, disbelief coloring his voice. I nodded once, a firm, clear movement. Call him, I instructed. My mother blinked, her practiced smile finally faltering. Leia's phone tilted higher, ready for the spectacle. My father stared at me for half a beat, trying to read my expression, trying to find the fear he expected to see. Then he pulled his phone from his coat pocket with slow, deliberate confidence, like he had just been given the moment he truly wanted, the moment to crush my spirit once and for all. Fine, he said, his voice dripping with false triumph. Let's do this properly. Began to dial, his fingers moving with an air of practiced ease, as if he were calling his stockbroker or his golf partner, not attempting to dismantle his own daughter's livelihood. He held the phone to his ear, his eyes fixed on me, a smug smirk playing on his lips. My mother finally broke her silent facade. Honestly, Clara, this is unnecessary, she murmured, her voice laced with disappointment, as if I were the one creating the scene. Your father is only looking out for your best interests. This business is so vulnerable. Vulnerable. That word hung in the air, a weapon disguised as concern. Leia stepped closer, her phone now held like a news reporter's microphone, ready to capture every tear, every tremor of my defeat. I could feel the prickle of sweat on my palms, the rapid thumping of my heart, but I forced myself to remain outwardly calm, my gaze steady on my father. He let the phone ring a few times, drawing out the suspense, making sure everyone in the room could hear the silent stretching, waiting for the connection. Each ring felt like a drumbeat counting down to my apparent doom. The quiet in the coffee shop was so intense, I could hear the faint whir of the refrigerator behind me, the gentle drip of the coffee machine. My father's smirk widened, anticipating victory. He knew I had nothing. He knew I was on my own. He had made sure of it for 4 long years. He finally spoke into the phone, his voice booming with false cordiality. Mr. Henderson, Robert Jensen here. Yes, a pleasant morning to you too. I'm calling about the property at Alder Street, specifically Suite 101, which my daughter, Clara Jensen, is currently occupying. There are a few concerns that have come to my attention regarding the usage and, shall we say, the overall stability of her operation there. I thought it best to bring them to your attention directly before things, complicate further. He paused, clearly expecting a specific response from Mr. Henderson, perhaps an immediate panic or an invitation to discuss my alleged failings in detail. He looked at me, a gleam in his eye, a silent warning that my punishment was about to begin. My mother nodded approvingly, her lips pursed. Leia's camera zoomed in a fraction, ready for the money shot of my despair. but I didn't flinch. I reached out, took my father's phone from his hand, and without a word pressed the speakerphone button. His eyes widened, first in surprise, then in rage. "What do you think you're doing, Clara?" he hissed, but his voice was already echoing for everyone to hear. Before he could snatch the phone back, Mr. Henderson's voice, calm and clear, filled the room. "Robert, is everything all right over there? Why am I on speakerphone?" My father was visibly thrown, caught off guard by the direct question. He stammered for a moment, trying to regain control. "Ah, yes, Mr. Henderson, just a small family matter. My daughter here decided to air her grievances publicly, you see. I was merely informing you of some irregularities." But Mr. Henderson cut him off, his voice carrying an unexpected hint of amusement, of something knowing. "Irregularities? Robert, are you quite sure you're aware of all the irregularities regarding that specific property?" My father's face was turning a mottled red. "What are you implying, sir? I have extensive knowledge of property law and tenant agreements." Mr. Henderson chuckled, a dry, reedy sound that sent a shiver down my spine, but not of fear, of anticipation. Then he asked the question that changed the entire room, a question so simple yet so utterly devastating to my father, a question that made every customer gasp, a question that felt like a bolt of lightning, striking down my father's entire edifice of power and control. "Robert, are you calling about your daughter, Clara Jensen, the one who just closed on the purchase of that building last month?" The silence that followed was deafening. It was heavier than any silence before, thick with shock and utter disbelief. My father's jaw dropped. His face went from mottled red to an ashen gray, all the blood draining from it instantly. My mother gasped, a small, choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth. Leia's phone clattered to the floor, forgotten, her carefully composed, smug expression shattering into one of pure, unadulterated astonishment. The customers in the room, who had been holding their breath, collectively let it out in a stunned murmur. Grant, my history professor regular, let out a low whistle of appreciation. My father looked at me, his eyes wide and vacant, as if he were seeing a ghost. His carefully constructed world, his absolute certainty that he held all the cards, had just imploded around him. "Purchase?" He finally managed to stammer, his voice a pathetic squeak, a mere shadow of his earlier booming authority. What do you mean, purchase?" I looked at him, my expression calm, almost pitying. "It means, father, that I own the building. All of it. The space I rent for Riverbend Roasters is mine, as are the 2 apartments upstairs and the empty storefront next door. Mr. Henderson was a very fair seller, and he understood my vision for the community here. We closed the deal last month." I explained it simply, plainly, as if I were discussing the weather. I had spent the last 3 years scrimping, saving every penny, working long hours, learning about commercial real estate in my spare time. Mr. Henderson, a kind man who had owned the building for 40 years, had seen my dedication, my commitment to the neighborhood. He had even offered me a very generous owner financing agreement, preferring to sell to someone who truly cared about the property rather than a big corporation. It had been my secret, my ultimate act of independence, the one thing I knew would truly free me from their looming shadows. Mr. Henderson, still on speakerphone, added gently, "Indeed, Robert. Clara has been an exemplary tenant and now an even more exemplary owner. She's already got plans to renovate the upstairs units and bring in another small business next door. It's quite inspiring, actually." My father swayed slightly, as if the floor had tilted beneath him. The 15% contract, which he had so confidently placed on my counter, now looked like a child's drawing, utterly meaningless. His threat to call the landlord, the one he thought would ruin me, had instead exposed his own profound ignorance and arrogance. He had been so sure I was still the vulnerable, dependent daughter he had cast aside. He had never once considered that I might have been quietly building an empire while he believed I was floundering. My mother's face was contorted in a mixture of embarrassment and something akin to betrayal. Leia, still on the floor, slowly reached for her phone, her earlier desire to film my downfall now replaced by a frantic need to disappear. I picked up my father's phone from the counter. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Henderson. I'll speak to you later about those renovation plans." "Of course, Clara," he replied warmly. "Congratulations again, you've earned it." I ended the call. The click echoed in the stunned silence. My father stood there, defeated, diminished, a mere shadow of the powerful man who had stormed into my shop just minutes earlier. My mother, recovering slightly, tried to muster some of her old condescension. "Clara, darling, you should have told us. We could have helped you with the paperwork, advised you." I looked at her, my gaze unwavering. "You cut me off, Mother. Remember, for 4 years I didn't exist. I learned to do everything myself. Leah finally managed to stand, her face flushed with shame. She avoided my eyes, mumbled something about needing to charge her phone, and practically ran for the door. My father, gathering what little dignity he had left, finally spoke, his voice hoarse. This is not how business is done, Clara. This is a betrayal. I simply smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached my eyes for the first time that morning. No, father, I said, my voice soft but firm. This is exactly how business is done. It's called hard work, resilience, and not underestimating the person you thought you could control. I picked up the contract he had brought, the one demanding 15% of my business. I tore it slowly, deliberately into tiny pieces, letting them flutter into the trash bin beneath the counter. Then I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a man stripped bare of his power, exposed for his cruel presumption. Now, I said, my voice echoing a newfound authority. Is there anything else I can help you with today, or are you ready to leave my property? He didn't say another word. He turned, a broken man, and walked out, his polished shoes no longer clicking confidently but dragging slightly. My mother, after one last, futile attempt at a pitying look, scurried out after him. The bell above the door chimed their exit, and this time, the sound felt like freedom. The customers in Riverbend Roasters erupted in applause. Grant raised his coffee cup in a silent toast. Mr. and Mrs. Evans clapped their hands together, their faces beaming with pride. A woman near the pastry case gave me a thumbs up. I felt a wave of emotion wash over me, gratitude, relief, but most of all, a profound sense of peace. My independence wasn't just something I had built, it was something I had defended, and in doing so, I had forged it into an unbreakable fortress. My new normal was incredible. The story, naturally, spread like wildfire through Richmond. Regulars brought me flowers, offering words of encouragement and support. New customers, drawn by the tale of the coffee shop owner who owned her own building and stood up to her overbearing family, flocked to Riverbend Roasters. Leia's attempted video of my downfall, if she ever posted it, was drowned out by the genuine admiration for my triumph. My business thrived. I hired new baristas, expanded my pastry selection, and started planning community events in the now-empty storefront next door, dreaming of an art gallery or a small bookstore. I even managed to pay off a significant portion of my owner financing loan within months, and the unexpected twist. A few weeks later, Mr. Henderson called me. "Clara," he said, his voice a little lower than usual, "I have something to tell you. Your father, Robert," he called me again, quite distraught. He thought he could pull some strings, leverage some old connections to try and buy the building out from under you, claiming you misled him. I chuckled, feeling a sense of deep satisfaction. "And what did you tell him, Mr. Henderson?" He paused, a chuckle in his own voice. "I told him that not only did you legally purchase the property, but that your father had a very similar, shall we say, unorthodox approach to business himself many years ago. I reminded him of a rather significant loan I once provided to him, one he never quite fully repaid before selling off his assets to avoid the debt. I simply suggested that perhaps he should focus on his own financial rectitude before questioning yours, especially given that I still hold his original promissory note." I laughed out loud, a full, joyful sound. My father, the master manipulator, had forgotten that Mr. Henderson wasn't just a landlord, but a witness to his own past transgressions. He hadn't just been outmaneuvered by his daughter, he had been outmaneuvered by the very history he thought he could erase. Riverbend Roasters wasn't just my triumph, it was a quiet, delicious, perfectly brewed cup of poetic justice.